Hello, Ricardo here. I'm Visa Developers Director of Community. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a project with the Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service API, and then test the APIs using our very own Visa Developer Center playground in Sandbox. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the basics, how to find the API documentation. From the home page, click on the APIs tab on the navigation bar. You'll see these options. You can either browse all APIs, which shows you the full list of APIs on Visa Developer, or you can also browse by category. If you click Data and Analytics, you can find the Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service, or VBAS. Clicking the Overview link will bring you to the VBAS Overview page. This is one of your resources to learning more about the API, its key features, and how to use it. Plus, more importantly, a link to API docs, which we'll come back to later. Let's click on Start Project. Since I'm already logged in, it will take me to my dashboard. If you aren't logged in, it'll ask for your credentials and then route you here. Once you're there, you'll want to click on Create Your First Project. If you already have a project, you'll see Add New Project. The next page will ask for details about your project. The first thing you want to do is enter a project name. So let's name this project Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service Tutorial. The next field is the project description. You don't have to add this, but it's a great place to provide some brief information about your use case. Next, select your API. We will select Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and select either one of these options. Let's go ahead and choose the default option, Generate a CSR for me, and click Create Project. That'll bring up a pop-up message prompting you to save your certificate private key. We're going to download and copy the certificate private key. You can only download this key once when you create a project, so remember to save your private key. Now, after you've downloaded and saved the private key, click on the confirmation, then click Continue. At that point, you'll be redirected to the project you created. The full list of APIs under the Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service will be listed here. You should be able to see the single bin lookup and the full bin list APIs. Let's start with the single bin lookup. Click on the API reference. I'm going to open this in a new tab. So now let's come back to your project and click on the Credentials tab, and then click on the Download Certificate to download your project certificate. Be sure to store your project certificate and the private key to a folder that you can easily access, but keep confidential. Message level encryption is required for the single bin lookup API. MLE provides an enhanced security for message payload by using asymmetric encryption technique or public key cryptography. MLE is used to encrypt the JSON payload. You can find the documentation and sample code right here on Visa Developer Platform. You will need to use an API client that supports MLE to access the single bin lookup API. You can use the Visa Developer Center playground tool. It comes integrated with all required authentication methods to connect and get going with VDP APIs, including MLE. To download the VDC Playground tool, go to your dashboard, scroll all the way down to the General Assets section and click on VDC Playground to download it. Extract the files from the zip folder and open the VDP Playground executable jar file. Now let's add our project certificate and private key to the VDC Playground. To do that, browse and open the project certificate file and private key file that you previously downloaded under the mutual SSL certificates, public and private keys respectively. Since the single bin lookup API is message level encrypted, enable MLE. Now you will need to enter the key ID and the MLE public and private keys. Go back to your Visa Developer project under the Credentials tab. Click Generate Key ID under Encryption Decryption. This is the value that needs to be entered in the Key ID section under MLE on Visa Playground. Next, click Add CSR next to the Key ID. Select the default Generate a CSR for me and click Confirm. This will allow you to download the MLE private key. Download it, confirm, and continue. Click on the drop-down menu next to the key ID, and this will list the server and client encryption certificates. download the server encryption certificate, and this will be the MLE public key. Browse and open the MLE public and private keys that were downloaded on Visa Playground. We'll now add basic authentication credentials. Select Mutual SSL as the auth method. Now let's copy across the user ID and password from your project credentials on Visa Developer into the Visa Playground. Now let's create a request to test the single bin lookup API. Change the method from get to post. Then let's go back to our API reference page on Visa Developer. Click on Single Bin Lookup from the left navigation. From the Code Explorer on the right, copy the API endpoint and enter it on the Visa Playground. Next, from the Code Explorer, copy the request body into the Visa Playground request section. Note that the parameter payment account is mandatory when requesting the bin attribute. You will enter the PAN or token number here. The other parameter, payment account type, is also mandatory. And here you will either enter P if the above account is a PAN, or T if the above account is that of a token. A list of PAN and token numbers that you can test with is available under How to Use Visa Bin Attribute Sharing Service on the side navigation. Click Using Single Bin API to see sample data. Now click the Run button to send the API request. It'll return the bin attributes for the specific PAN entered. Notice the response body is now populated with the JSON response data with the bin attributes for the specific PAN entered. Note that the data returned in Sandbox is mock data only. For real data, a production request would have to be launched, subject to an agreement or sponsorship and approvals. To enter a bin value in the request for the parameter payment account, enter the 6 or 8-digit bin value followed by zeros, making it a 16-digit value and setting payment account type to P. For example, to see the attributes of the bin 425907, set payment account to 425907 and 10 zeros in the request body. Next, let's create a request to test the full bin list API. Ensure the method is set to post on Visa Playground. Now let's go back to our API reference page on Visa Developer. Click on the full bin list from the left navigation. From the Code Explorer on the right, copy the API endpoint and enter it on the Visa Playground. Next, from the Code Explorer, copy the request body into the Visa Playground request section. Note that the parameter bin range search index is mandatory when requesting the bin attribute. For the first API call, this should be set to 0. The other parameter, bin range count, is also mandatory. It represents the number of results you want returned at a time. You can return a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 500 records. For this call, I will set bin range count to 500. Since the full bin list API is not encrypted at the message level, it's not MLE enforced, so disable the message level encryption option on Visa Playground. Now click the Run button to send the API request. It'll return the bin attributes for the request. You'll notice the response body is now populated with the JSON response data that is returned by the API call. Again, note that the data returned in Sandbox is only mock data. This call returned the first 500 records of the bin attribute data. In the response, the attribute total record count indicates the total number of records available. The attribute num records returned indicates the number of records returned on this particular call. And the attribute rnext offset records available, if set to y, indicates there are more records available, and if set to n, indicates no more records available to retrieve. Since this is a full list of the bin attributes, you will need to make multiple calls to the API until all the records are received. That is, until the attribute rnext offset records available is returned as n. For all subsequent calls, set the parameter bin range search index to include the bin range count from the previous request, so you can continue to get the next sets of data, and set parameter bin range count between 1 and 500 to receive that many records on the response. When the response returns n for the attribute rnext offset records available, no further API calls are required, as all records have been returned. Alright, that wraps it up for this tutorial. If you need additional guidance about anything we've covered, you can visit our community page anytime to ask questions on our forum, or contact us directly at developer@visa.com. In the meantime, be sure to check out the other tutorials in our Visa Developer series. Thanks for watching.